Sounds like a stinky monster from Abigail's point of view. Obviously, Abigail is profoundly sensitive to garlic and onions. It causes her discomfort and displeasure. And it has been going on for 8 years. And yet she still loves Brian. And meanwhile, Brian has been living with someone who cannot tolerate even the smallest amount of garlic. And garlic to me is a very important flavor in my life. It would be very hard for me to give up garlic in my cooking, either powdered or fresh. Now, my rule of thumb with regard to that is that in a long, slow braise, powdered garlic and powdered onion can be used to bring up flavors. If you need to add some garlic in a slow cooking environment, that powdered garlic rehydrates and builds a different layer of garlic flavor into something that is different from fresh garlic. In the same way that dried herbs, like dried thyme, you would put that at the beginning of a long, slow cook of a soup. But if you're adding fresh thyme, you would add that at the end. That's a different, brighter, fresher flavor.
That's particularly true for garlic, the chemical profile of which and the flavor and odor profile of which change quite dramatically depending on how it is prepared. From the amount that the, cell walls are smushed increases the sharpness of flavor to the manner and length of heating and cooking.
Right. Is it a migraine trigger for you? Is that why you are sensitive to alliums? Alliums meaning garlic, onion, shallots, leeks, any of those bulby, pungent little dudes that you get out of the earth.
Yeah, if I eat particularly fresh garlic or a lot of sharp garlic, and I really like all of those foods, but if I eat the fresh, sharp versions of them, it is a particular migraine trigger. And it's one of the ones where many years ago I went on a migraine diet where I gave up everything that is a migraine trigger for everyone.
I thought you meant you only ate migraines.
Yeah. It was one of the ones where when I reintroduced it to my diet after not having had it for 6 months, I really did go cold turkey on like 20 different things for 6 months. It really stunk. But it was one of those things where when I reintroduced it to my diet, I was like, oh, yeah, every time I eat this, I get a migraine. I guess it's a migraine trigger, but it's particularly significant in its sharpest forms. So roasted garlic, I don't really have any problem with. Some well-cooked garlic, if I'm using it to, cook frozen green beans, I don't have a big problem with. But if I put a bunch of fresh garlic on garlic bread and don't cook the living out of it, it often causes me a headache. The same with onions. So like a grilled onion on a burger, not really a problem, not a ton of onions. If I eat some, a salad with a lot of fresh onions in it, it'll end up with a headache.
Jesse, I'm not sure how familiar you are with the city of San Francisco.
Never heard of it.
That's a city in the Bay Area.
Is that in New England?
No. It's almost the diametric opposite. It's on the other side of the country.
Got it.
I first went to San Francisco, I think that I was about 19 years old. And I was in town. A friend of ours got married very young. He is no longer married. My girlfriend, now wife at the time, we were all part of a big friend group. I hope, Charles, if you're listening, you will take this in the spirit in which it is meant, which is of deep affection and love. But my girlfriend at the time was sad that she could not go to San Francisco for this wedding. I guess maybe I was in my early 20s. I had to have been, now that I think of it, like 22. And she was sad that she couldn't attend this wedding. And her mom consoled her by saying, "Oh, don't worry about it, dear. There will be more Charles's weddings in the future." Both Charles and his bride found better lives apart than together, but they were getting married in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I went out with our friends from the friend group, those of us who could afford to go, and we all stayed together in a house. And Adam Sachs and I went to the Stinking Rose restaurant in San Francisco. Have you ever been to the Stinking Rose?
I haven't, but I'm familiar with the restaurant. It is a garlic-themed restaurant, not unlike the Gilroy Garlic Festival in Gilroy, California, where everything is flavored with huge amounts of garlic.
Right.
Or the famous garlic fries at the ballpark in San Francisco.
I think Abigail is probably weeping and puking at this moment just hearing all of this. And I thought this was, everything there was garlicky, and it had paintings of garlic on the wall. And I was like, this is the most sophisticated restaurant I've ever been in. And that's the first time I ever had bagna cauda, which is a garlic and anchovy infused warm olive oil that you dip bread and crudité into. I love garlic. I love it. But, Abigail obviously doesn't. Should I commend them for having stayed together despite this obvious difference in literal taste and smell? Because Brian obviously likes garlic fine. He's going to breathe it all over the place. He's eaten it so much. Or do I point out the problem that over 8 years of Brian knowing that Abigail cannot tolerate this, literally or figuratively, that he's still doing it such to the point that she's coming now to a fake internet court to get relief? I'm going to have to presume that they love each other very much, and Brian just hasn't gotten the message yet. That despite it being an obvious, for someone who likes garlic, it's a huge sacrifice to cook without garlic. So many cuisines use garlic because it's so good. It's so good. It's such an important and interesting and irreplaceable flavor. And yet I like to think that if that woman who was my girlfriend and is now my wife just could not stand it, that I would not cook with it. And I would limit my eating to it. And then once or twice a year, I would go out to San Francisco and go to the Stinking Rose by myself and just go garlic all the way. Just have a garlic men's weekend. Mm-hmm. But I think, Brian, I think you got to cut it out. I think you got to cut out the garlic. Try some other weird flavors, like try some anchovy. Try some other strong flavors. Fish sauce, if that doesn't have garlic in it. I bet that probably, Abigail won't like that either. Try to replace garlic in your flavor profiles with like Bragg's amino acids and other big, heavy umami flavors like miso, for example. Use miso in marinades instead of garlic. Miso on a steak is an incredible marinade and sort of after grilling topping, which I just discovered is fantastic. Broaden your repertoire and see if you can find something else that gives you that same kind of deep, funky kick that garlic gives you. You're in this relationship not just to eat garlic, but to occasionally hug and kiss one another, so you got to respect Abigail on this.
The docket is clear. That's it for another episode of Judge John Hodgman. This week's episode edited by Jesus Ambrosio, produced by Hannah Smith. Follow us on Twitter at Jesse Thorne and at Hodgman. We're on Instagram at Judge John Hodgman. Make sure to hashtag your Judge John Hodgman tweets, hashtag JJHO, and check out the Maximum Fun subreddit to discuss this episode. That's at MaximumFun.reddit.com. Submit your cases at MaximumFun.org/JJHO or email Hodgman@MaximumFun.org. We'll see you next time on the Judge John Hodgman podcast.
MaximumFun.org.
Comedy and culture.
Artist owned.
Audience supported.
Welcome to the Judge John Hodgman podcast. I'm bailiff Jesse Thorne. This week's episode recorded live in Durham, North Carolina at the Carolina Theater.
And this is your Judge John Hodgman. This is also our last episode of the year. We hope you have a very happy new year. Thank you for listening. We'll be back in 2020 to bring you more justice.
Let's go to the stage at the Carolina Theater.
Durham, you've come to us desperate for justice, and we're here at the Carolina Theater to deliver it. Friends, let's bring out our first set of litigants. Please welcome to the stage Grant and Pastor Irvin. Tonight's